Hey guys, tonight we are going to pull back the curtain of reality itself to sit in on a work shift that never ends. We're visiting the single most powerful and arguably most tedious workshop in the entire cosmos. You're about to become an invisible observer, watching the three fates the Moiraias they go about their slow, methodical work. We'll be focusing on one particular thread they're spinning, a destiny so plain, so utterly average that it's the perfect lullaby. Frankly, if you were a famous hero from a Greek epic, you wouldn't survive a single heroic quest if these three decided your story was getting a bit too long. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always warming to know how vast our community of nocturnal historians reaches. Now, as you settle into your cozy bed or favourite armchair, and we get ready to dive into tonight's trip into mythical times, I invite you to leave a comment sharing where in the world you're tuning in from and what time of day it is for you. You don't arrive so much as you simply become aware that you are there. There was no flash of light, no tumble through a portal. One moment, you were settling into the familiar comfort of your bed, and the next, you are standing in a place that defies description by its very lack of it. The first thing you notice is the colour, or rather, the profound absence of it. The space around you is a uniform, matte grey. Not the grey of a storm cloud or of cold steel, but the grey of thought before it becomes a word. The grey of deep, dreamless sleep. It's a colour that absorbs light and sound and emotion, leaving a kind of serene emptiness in its wake. The space is impossibly vast. You can't see any walls, or a ceiling, or a floor in the traditional sense. You're simply standing on a stable, flat plane of this same nothingness that extends into an infinite, misty horizon in every direction. It's not frightening, just final. This place was not built. It has simply always been. And in the centre of this endless grey expanse, sitting on a simple stone bench, are three figures. Three women, ancient beyond the measure of stars, silhouetted against the formless backdrop. And from them, from the very air itself, comes a sound. It is a low, constant hum, a vibration you feel more in your bones than in your ears. It's the sound of a universe idling, the background noise of existence. It's the sound of destiny's engine, and it's been running without pause since the beginning of everything. It's oddly comforting, like the hum of an ancient cosmic refrigerator working tirelessly to keep reality from spoiling. As your eyes adjust to the soft, sourceless light, you begin to see them more clearly. These are the Moirai, the fates of Greek legend. To the Romans, they would later be known as the Parkenona, Decima, and Morta. But here, in their raw, primordial form, they are Clotho, the spinner, Lachesis, the allotter, and Atropos, the unturnable. They sit together, yet seem to be in their own worlds, their focus absolute. They don't look up. They don't acknowledge your presence. To them, you are less than a mote of dust, simply another ripple in the sea of being that they so casually command. There is no grand throne room, no divine architecture. This isn't an HGTV dream home. Their workshop is function over form, an eternal monument to a single unending task. They are dressed in simple, unadorned robes, of the same indeterminate grey as their surroundings. The early poet Hesiod, in his Theogony, described them as the fearsome daughters of Nyx, the primordial goddess of night herself. This lineage makes them entities far older and more fundamental than the flashy Olympians, who would later dominate the myths. Scholars of mythology still debate whether the decrees spun into these threads were absolute, or if even a king of the gods, like Zeus, could petition for an alteration. Could he bargain for a favourite hero, or spare a cherished mortal? Some myths suggest he could, but looking at the grave, implacable focus on their faces now, you get the distinct impression that there's no divine suggestion box here. Any complaints would be met with the same silent, uninterrupted work. They are not cruel, not kind. They are simply necessary. They are the personification of cosmic order, and your sudden appearance in their workspace is no more distracting to them than a single falling leaf in a vast, ancient forest. Their silence is profound, broken only by that eternal, steady hum and the soft, rhythmic sounds of their craft. A craft we are about to witness up close. Your gaze is drawn to the figure on the left, the one called Clotho. She is the spinner, the beginning of the process. Like her sisters, she is ageless. Her face a mask of serene concentration, etched with lines that are not from worry or laughter, but from the simple, crushing weight of eons. Her posture is one of perfect, practiced stillness. But now, something is about to happen. You see her hands, gnarled and ancient, with fingers as delicate and certain as the roots of an old olive tree, begin to stir. She doesn't reach for a basket of wool or a bale of cotton. Her raw material is not of the physical world. Instead, she lifts one hand, palm up, into the grey air before her. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the empty space above her palm begins to shimmer. A faint luminescence gathers, a wisp of mist that seems less like matter and more like captured starlight. This is the raw material of life, the ethereal fluff of pure potential. It is the unformed essence of a soul, a mote of being that has been chosen, has simply floated into its turn to be given a story. It has no personality yet, no desires, no fears. It is simply possibility. You watch as more of this glowing vapour coalesces, drawn from the infinite grey void around you. It drifts and swirls, coalescing into a soft, glowing ball about the size of a fist. It looks a bit like the most sublime bit of cosmic cotton candy ever imagined, but without any of the sticky mess. This is the moment before the beginning, the silent breath before the first cry. The ancient Greeks had many ideas about where a life truly began. Philosophers like Plato mused on the concept of anamnesis, the idea that souls existed in a perfect, knowledgeable state before being incarnated into a body, and that learning was just the act of remembering this past perfection. Looking at this little ball of light, you can almost believe it. This is the psyche, the breath of life, before it's been tethered to the clumsy mechanics of a mortal form and forced to forget its cosmic origins. This glowing potential seems to hold all knowledge within it, pure and unburdened. Of course, this was a rather high-minded take. More common folk beliefs held quirkier ideas about where new lives came from. A quirky tidbit from the fringes of history is the belief in some rural regions that certain winds carried the seeds of life, and that a woman facing the right direction during a particular gust could become pregnant. There was no centralized cosmic HR department taking applications. Sometimes, you just had to hope a benevolent, baby-filled breeze was blowing your way. As Clotho holds the gathered potential, you realize she embodies the great, unanswered question about the fates. Historians still argue whether they were simply administrators of destiny or its actual authors. Did Clotho just now summon a pre-existing spark of life that was created by some other divine force? Or did her very act of focusing on the void create the spark itself? Was she the clerk or the creator? The myths are ambiguous, and the stoic expression on her face gives away no trade secrets. She simply performs her function, as she has done for every being from the smallest field mouse to the mightiest king. She doesn't inspect the shimmering ball of light with any particular interest. To her, it is simply the next unit of work on an eternal assembly line. There's no welcome packet, no orientation seminar for the little soul. It's just another job to be done. The shimmering mass now seems to stabilize, its light pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm, like a tiny sleeping heart. Clotho's other hand moves, with the same unhurried grace, toward the tools resting beside her on the stone bench. Her movements are a study in efficiency. There is not a single wasted gesture, not a flicker of hesitation. For an entity that has been doing the same job for literally all of time, you suppose she's gotten quite good at it. You imagine she has no need for modern ergonomic aids or wrist support braces. Her form is perfect, honed by a billion repetitions. The collected potential now waits, a silent promise hanging in the air, glowing softly in her ancient hand. It is pure and unwritten, a story with no words, a life with no length. That part comes next. For now, it simply is, held gently but firmly by the being who will give it its first tangible form. A single, simple thread. Her movements are a fluid dance of intention. Clotho picks up a tool from the stone bench beside her. It is a distaff, a simple, unadorned staff of some polished, dark material that seems to drink the grey light. You've seen illustrations of these in old history books, used to hold unspun fibres like wool or flax. She holds it with an ease that speaks of infinite practice. Then, with her other hand, she gently presses the shimmering ball of potential onto the top of the distaff. The light clings to it, and for a moment, it looks like a divine, glowing lollipop. She doesn't need to check a how-to video on some cosmic streaming service. Her muscle memory predates the invention of muscles themselves. Now, her fingers, impossibly nimble, pinch a tiny wisp from the glowing mass. Just a few strands of ethereal light. She draws them out, her touch feather light, and attaches them to the hook of a second instrument, the spindle. This is her primary tool, a slender rod with a weighted disc, or whirl, at its base. You watch, captivated, as she gives the spindle a deft, practiced twist with her thumb and forefinger, and it begins. The spindle drops, suspended by that new, fragile filament of light, and it starts to turn. It spins with a silent, hypnotic grace, its weight pulling the fibres from the distaff, while the rotation twists them together. It is this twisting motion, this simple act of physics, that gives the strand its strength, turning formless potential into a tangible line. The sight is utterly mesmerizing. The gentle, clockwise pirouette of the spindle, the slow descent as it draws out more fibre, the way Clotho's hands guide the process without ever seeming to rush. A soft, almost inaudible shh sound begins, the sound of starlight being twisted into fate. It is the most fundamental sound of creation, and it's as soothing as the gentle lapping of waves on a shore. This tool, the simple drop spindle, is one of humanity's oldest and most essential inventions. For thousands of years, from Neolithic villages to bustling Roman cities, this was how clothing was born. The historical fates of myth were conceived in a world where this rhythmic spinning was a near constant backdrop to daily life, a sound and motion familiar to every woman and many men. The very real wool from sheep and linen from flax plants were painstakingly spun into thread, day after day, to clothe families and armies. Looking at Clotho now, you see the divine archetype of that mundane yet foundational human labour. The fate of an empire and the fate of your favourite cosy sweater both started with a motion exactly like this. As the spindle turns, the thread that forms is unremarkable. It is not the gleaming gold you might expect for a king, nor the blood red of a warrior. It's a simple, unassuming grey, a shade or two darker than the void around you. It's a sturdy, utilitarian thread, the kind meant for a life of quiet work and simple joys, not epic poems. A destiny-grade thread, sure, but definitely from the sensible part of the catalogue, not the flashy seasonal collection. The thread lengthens steadily, coiling onto the spindle as Clotho periodically gathers it. Her pace is unhurried. There is no deadline, no quota to meet. The universe can wait. In many ancient cultures, the act of spinning, especially at night, was fraught with superstition. It was considered a liminal act, bridging the worlds of order and chaos, and could attract mischievous or even malevolent spirits. There were tales of old crones spinning curses into thread under the dark of a new moon. It's a quirky and widespread tidbit of folklore, the idea that such a domestic task could be so magically potent. And here, in the heart of all creation, you see the irony. The Moirai are working through the eternal night of the cosmos, performing the very act that mortals were warned against, but on a scale that defies mortal superstition entirely. As you watch Clotho spin, your eyes drift to her sisters. Lachesis watches the thread lengthen with a dispassionate gaze, while Atropos simply sits, her sharp shears resting in her lap, her expression one of utter patience. It's in moments like this that you can see the conflict in their very depiction throughout history. Historians still argue whether the Moirai were depicted as beautiful, detached maidens, or as fearsome, unapproachable old crones in early art and literature. Hesiod made them sound terrifying, primordial forces born of night. Later, representations softened them. Looking at them now, you feel neither beauty nor fear, just an overwhelming sense of competence. They are the ultimate professionals. The thread continues to grow, thickening and lengthening with each hypnotic rotation of the spindle, a testament to a process that is both utterly mundane and divinely significant, all at once. Your focus now shifts from the mesmerizing motion of the spindle to the tools themselves. They seem simple, almost primitive, yet they resonate with an antiquity that makes mountains look like mayflies. These are not just objects, they are concepts given form, the physical anchors for an abstract, cosmic process. You find yourself examining the distaff, the instrument holding the raw potential of this new life. It rests lightly in the crook of Clotho's arm, a smooth, dark rod about the length of her forearm. What is it made of? It's not wood, not stone, not metal. It has the slight sheen of polished obsidian, but it absorbs light rather than reflecting it. If you had to guess, you'd say it was carved from a branch of night itself, a solid piece of the void that birthed these beings. In the hands of a mortal shepherdess or weaver in ancient Greece, a distaff would have been a common and highly personalised tool. Many were carved from woods like yew or boxwood, sometimes decorated with simple patterns or polished to a smooth finish by years of use. It's a classic historical fact that the skill of a woman was often judged by the quality and fineness of the thread she could spin, a direct result of her practiced handling of the distaff and spindle. This divine distaff, however, needs no such adornment. Its plainness is its majesty. It doesn't hold wool or flax. It holds pure, unspun, elan vital, the life force of the universe. The little glowing ball of light atop it doesn't diminish as the thread is drawn out. It's a paradox, an inexhaustible source for a finite creation. The potential for a life, it seems, is infinite. It's the allotment that gives it boundaries. Next, you look more closely at the spindle. It too is made of this same dark, starless material. It consists of a slender shaft, tapered at both ends, and a hauler-weighted, disc-shaped object that provides the momentum for its spin. In the mortal world, spindle whorls are one of the most common archaeological finds, dating back tens of thousands of years. They were made of stone, clay, bone, or even amber. Archaeologists have found thousands of them, each one a small, tangible link to an ancient woman who spent countless hours spinning, just like Clotho. Some were plain and functional. Others, a quirky historical tidbit, were inscribed with the owner's name, or even with little charms and blessings, as if to imbue the thread with good fortune. It was the ancient equivalent of putting a sticker on your laptop. You wonder if this spindle has a blessing on it, something like "World's okayest fate spinner." The whorl on Clotho's spindle is a perfect, smooth disc. There are no inscriptions, no good luck charms. It doesn't need them. Its weight is perfect, calibrated by eons of practice to produce a thread of a specific, consistent thickness. It spins without the slightest wobble, its rotation a silent testament to its flawless balance. It's this weight and balance that allows for the drop spindle technique, where the spindle hangs and spins freely, its own gravity pulling the fibres into a consistent strand. Clotho's hands are not pulling the thread. They are simply guiding the supply, controlling the thickness with a pinch of her expert fingers, letting gravity and rotation do the work. It's a masterclass in elegant, effortless physics. There's a long-standing academic debate among classical scholars regarding the metaphorical meaning of these tools. Historians still argue whether the distaff represents the unchanging substance of the cosmos, or the female principle from which all life emerges. Was the spindle, with its active twisting motion, a symbol of the shaping force of time and experience? Or are these just the most logical tools for the job, elevated to a divine level by storytellers who saw these same instruments in their own homes every day? The answer is likely somewhere in between. Myth is often born from the marriage of the mundane and the magnificent. These tools are both. They are simple machines operating on basic principles of physics, yet in this context they are turning abstract possibility into tangible reality. As the spindle continues its gentle descent, its steady rotation twisting the glowing filaments into a solid grey thread of destiny, you appreciate the quiet elegance of the design. No complex celestial machinery, no noisy divine engine room, just three timeless beings, two simple tools, and a process as quiet and fundamental as the drawing of a breath. You continue to watch the process, completely mesmerized. The thread lengthens, coiling steadily onto the lower shaft of the spindle as Clotho guides it with a practiced hand. Now that your focus has settled, you begin to truly appreciate the nature of the thread itself. It's plain. There's no other word for it. It lacks any sort of luminosity or special texture. It is a simple, serviceable grey, the colour of a cobblestone on a drizzly morning, or a well-worn wool blanket. There's an odd sense of relief in its simplicity. This isn't the story of a hero. This is not the life of someone destined to topple empires, discover new continents, or anger a pantheon of bored and vengeful gods. This thread belongs to a farmer, perhaps, or a potter, a fisherman, a merchant's clerk. It belongs to someone who will be born, live a life of small, meaningful moments, and then die, likely without their name ever being recorded in a history book. For every Achilles whose life was famously a choice between a short, glorious thread and a long, dull one, there were 1,000,000 souls whose thread was never even offered a choice. Theirs was spun from the start, to be strong, functional, and deeply, deeply average. There's a certain modern comedy in the idea of a cosmic factory producing bespoke, artisan destinies for the famous while everyone else gets the mass-produced, generic brand fate. Sorry pal, all out of the hero grade filament. Best I can do is this standard issue 60-year thread with a slight chance of a moderately successful pottery business. The sheer uniformity of it is what makes it so soothing to observe. The thickness of the thread never wavers. It's a testament to Clotho's infinite skill, a level of quality control that modern manufacturing can only dream of. A basic fact of ancient textile production is that creating a consistent thread thickness by hand is incredibly difficult. Lumps and thin spots were common signs of an inexperienced or distracted spinner. A truly even thread, or grist, was the mark of a master artisan. Clotho's thread is beyond masterful. It is perfection. Each inch is identical to the last. This isn't just a life. It's a stable, predictable life. A life without terrifying plummets into poverty or dizzying, unstable ascents to power. It's the thread of someone who will know where their next meal is coming from, who will likely die in the same village they were born in, surrounded by familiar faces. In a world defined by chaos and uncertainty, that's a kind of luxury. As you look closer, you notice that its texture, while uniform, is not perfectly smooth. It has a slight fuzziness to it, a subtle halo of nearly invisible fibres that surround the main strand. This texture makes it seem warm and soft, like worn flannel. It lacks the cold, hard sheen of silk, or the rough-hewn scratchiness of raw jute. This is the thread of a comfortable life, not an opulent one. It's the kind of material that could be woven into a sturdy tunic, not a king's banner. It's the texture of contentment. A strange, quirky detail that comes to mind is the ancient Greek concept of the daimon, a personal spirit assigned at birth that guided one's destiny. It wasn't necessarily good or evil like a demon, but more of a guiding life force. Perhaps this plain thread came with a plain daimon, a little spiritual guide whose best advice was, "Don't forget to salt your stew," and "Try to get a good night's sleep." The fates, it seems, were not interested only in the grand tapestry of heroes and gods. The strength of that tapestry relied on the warp and weft of these countless, seemingly insignificant lives. Without the farmer, the hero starves. Without the stonemason, the king has no castle. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek society placed more cultural value on the celebrated individual, the aristos, or best man, or on the collective, the demos, or the people. Homeric epics glorify the individual hero, but the rise of the city-state, the polis, depended on the coordinated work of thousands of ordinary citizens. This thread, spinning silently in the void, feels like an answer. It represents the quiet, foundational majority. The Moirai, it appears, spend most of their eternal work shift spinning threads, just like this one, billions of them. It's the most important work they do, ensuring the continuity and stability of the world, even if it's the part of their job that no poet will ever write a song about. And the grey, unremarkable thread just keeps on spinning, lengthening, second by silent second. Just as you've grown accustomed to the soothing monotony of the grey thread, something happens. Clotho pauses her spinning for the barest fraction of a second. From the grey void beside her, a tiny speck of colour materialises. It's a deep, rich crimson, the colour of wine or blood, and it drifts slowly, lazily, towards the spinning thread like a fleck of dust caught in a sunbeam. With a flick of her finger, so subtle you almost miss it, Clotho intercepts the speck and rolls it directly into the filament. For a single turn of the spindle, the thread is no longer grey, but a vibrant red, before returning just as suddenly to its original placid colour. It's a tiny, almost imperceptible imperfection. A single coloured stitch in a vast grey blanket. You realise what you've just seen. A moment of intense passion has just been woven into this otherwise unremarkable life. It could be anything. A sudden, unrequited love for a childhood friend. A flash of violent anger in a tavern brawl. The heart-stopping moment of a near-fatal accident. The birth of a first child. A moment of profound, painful, crimson joy. This is how the fates add texture to their work. The story is not in the plain grey strand, but in these rare, scattered flecks of colour. A life without them would be a life without feeling, a truly grey existence. Moments later, another speck appears. This one is a brilliant, shimmering gold, like a drop of liquid honey. It floats serenely and is just as deftly integrated into the thread. A tiny gleaming band of gold is now locked within the grey. What does this one mean? A sudden, unexpected kindness from a stranger. A day of perfect, uncomplicated happiness spent fishing by a river. The simple, golden glow of sitting by a warm fire on a cold night, feeling perfectly safe and content. Or perhaps, remembering that slightly wacky tidbit about ancient Greek medicine, it was the day this person's physician prescribed a laughter cure for their melancholy, a genuine practice where doctors encouraged mirth to balance the body's humours. This person experienced a day of pure, prescribed joy. A while later, a dark fleck appears, this time a deep, inky indigo. It's the colour of a starless midnight sky, or a deep bruise. Clotho works this one in with the same dispassionate efficiency. This will be a moment of sorrow, the loss of a parent, a season of drought that withers the crops, a period of quiet, gnawing loneliness. These flecks are not judgments. They are simply facts of a life, the necessary shadows that give the brighter moments their meaning. There is no more emotion on Clotho's face as she weaves in the sorrow than when she wove in the joy. To her, it's all just part of the pattern. It's another example of the fates' implacability, a core concept in Greek thought. It didn't matter how pious or good you were, tragedy, a mainstream fact of the human condition, was considered an unavoidable part of one's moira or allotted portion. You find yourself staring intently, waiting for the next fleck. You're becoming a gossip columnist for this anonymous soul's life, trying to interpret the story from these tiny infusions of colour. Green, for a moment of envy. Silver, for a moment of clarity and wisdom. Orange, for a burst of creative inspiration. The colours are few and far between. Most of the thread remains stubbornly, beautifully grey. This is not a life of high drama. This is a life of routine, of gentle, rolling hills, rather than jagged mountain peaks. The flashes of colour are just that, flashes. They are the moments that this person, at the end of their days, would remember. The grey expanse in between is the stuff they would forget, the thousands of ordinary meals, the countless footsteps on the same path to the well, the endless rhythm of mundane work. Historians still argue whether the concept of free will coexisted with this rigid model of fate in the Greek mind. Did the flecks of colour represent choices made by the mortal that altered the thread, or were they predestined highlights simply being added at the appropriate pre-scripted moment? Watching Clotho, it seems the latter is true. The flecks drift in from the void on their own schedule, not in response to anything. They are ingredients to be added, not reactions to be recorded. It's a humbling thought. The most passionate, most joyful, most sorrowful moments of this person's life are just coloured dust floating in from nowhere, expertly and emotionlessly spun into their designated place in the timeline by an ancient, unblinking artisan. For what seems like an eternity, Clotho continues her serene, hypnotic work. The spindle, now heavy with coiled thread, rests on the grey ground, continuing to spin, gathering more and more of the life of this unknown soul. But then, there is a change in the quiet tableau. The first sister, the spinner, gently brings her spindle to a halt. The thread does not break. It simply waits, suspended between her fingers and the tool. It's now the second sister's turn to act. You turn your attention to the central figure on the bench, Lachesis. Her name means the allotter or the drawer of lots, and her job is to measure the thread that Clotho has spun. Up until this moment, she has been the picture of placid observation, her hands resting in her lap. Now, with the same unhurried and deliberate grace as her sister, she reaches for the thread. Her fingers, just as ancient and capable as Clotho's, take hold of the very beginning of the grey strand. Lachesis doesn't use a ruler or a measuring tape marked with years and days. Such mortal concepts are far too clumsy and specific for this level of work. Her instrument is far more fundamental. It is the span of her own arm. She pinches the start of the thread and, in a smooth, practiced motion, pulls it through her other hand, extending her arm out to its full length, one full arm's length of destiny, a fathom of fate. As she measures, her eyes are not on the thread itself, but on something far away, in the infinite grey distance. It's as if she is consulting a ledger that is invisible to you, confirming the assigned quantity. She is cross-referencing the order slip for this particular soul. Was this a rush order? Or was the standard lifespan approved? You get the comical image of a celestial bureaucracy at work. Lachesis double-checking the paperwork to make sure Clotho hasn't accidentally spun the thread for a mayfly instead of a man. The sheer banality of it measure twice. Cut once applied to the very fabric of existence. She completes the first measure and then, without pause, brings her hands back together to begin a second. The movement is rhythmic, like a fisherman pulling in a net or a weaver preparing their loom. Each measure is precise, identical, a silent counting of the allotted time. A historical fact that springs to mind is the origin of many ancient units of measurement from the human body itself. The cubit, the length of a forearm, the foot, the digit, a finger's width. Lachesis is using the original divine version of this system. She is literally doling out a lifetime, arm length by arm length. You wonder what the conversion rate is. Does one of her divine arm lengths equal a decade of mortal time? Or is it a more variable measure, an allotment of experiences rather than a simple duration? Looking at her face, you see the same serene detachment as Clotho, but where Clotho's concentration was on creation, Lachesis's is on allocation. She is the auditor of existence. This part of the process seems even more dispassionate. There is no creative spark here, just the cold, hard logistics of being. A strange, fringe belief from late antiquity, influenced by Neoplatonism, held that souls could, through great piety and philosophical contemplation, earn a more favourable allotment in their next incarnation. It was a kind of karmic ladder. But, watching Lachesis now, you sense that no amount of good behaviour or philosophical brownie points would influence her measure. The order has been placed, the quantity set. She is just filling it. There's no room for negotiation or appeal. The thread passes through her fingers, the little flecks of colour, the crimson, the gold, the indigo flashing past, one by one. She doesn't react to them. They are just blips in the data stream, markers within the length she is tasked to measure. They have no bearing on the total quantity. A joyful life, or a sorrowful one, can be long or short. The quality of the experience is irrelevant to the quantity of the time. Historians still argue about the nuances of the Greek word for one's lot in life, moira. Did it refer just to the time of one's death, or to the entire narrative contour of their life, including wealth, health, and status? Lachesis's role seems to focus on the most fundamental allotment, the when. How much time does this soul get in the mortal realm before its return? Her rhythmic, silent measuring provides the answer. Arm length after arm length of the plain grey thread slides through her fingers, a quiet and steady countdown in the heart of forever. As you watch Lachesis rhythmically measure out the thread, arm length after arm length, your mind begins to wander, not on the process, but on its implications. What, exactly, does the length she is measuring represent? Is a longer thread truly better? The silent, grey expanse around you seems to be the perfect place for such a profound and unsettling contemplation. You see her measure out what seems like a significant length. This is not the thread of a child who will be taken by a sudden fever, nor a soldier cut down in his first battle. This thread continues to unspool, yard after yard, fathom after fathom. It represents a life lived to a considerable age, a full and complete portion. This person will know the joy of seeing their own children grow, and perhaps even the faces of their children's children. They will accumulate decades of memories, a rich and complex personal history written in the subtle language of those coloured flecks. The mainstream Greek view, especially as expressed in epic poetry, certainly held that a long life was a great blessing, but only if it was also a good life. A long life filled with suffering, like that of the famously cursed Tithonus, who was granted immortality but not eternal youth, was considered the cruelest of fates. He withered into a cicada, his long life becoming an endless, chirping torment. This thread, however, with its comforting plainness, seems to promise a long and relatively stable existence. It's a retire and take up gardening sort of lifespan. Then, For a moment, you imagine a different thread, one that Lachesis might measure to only a single arm's length, a tragically short span, a baby who draws only a few breaths, a young woman who dies in childbirth. The abrupt end would feel like a profound injustice from a mortal perspective, but from here, in this place of absolute neutrality, you realize there is no judgment attached. The length is simply the length. The concept of a life cut short is a human one, born of love and grief. To the Moirai, it's just a shorter work order. The process is the same, whether they are spinning a thread for a gnat that lives a day, or a sequoia that lives for 3,000 years. It's a humbling and deeply calming perspective. You're reminded of a quirky tidbit from the world of ancient Greek funerary rites. While elaborate burials were common for adults, the graves of infants were often simple, sometimes even just buried in jars or enkitrismos. This wasn't necessarily a sign of callousness, but perhaps a reflection of a belief that a soul that had barely touched the world was not yet fully anchored to it, its thread barely having been spun before it was cut. Their journey back to the underworld, or to the raw potential of the cosmos, was considered a shorter, simpler one. Their files required less cosmic paperwork to close. As Lachesis continues her steady measuring, you start to perceive the span of a lifetime not as a line, but as a volume. It's a container. Some containers are small, like a thimble, holding only a few precious drops of experience. Others are vast, like a great cistern, holding years and years of accumulated joys, sorrows, and endless grey days. But no matter the size, the container is meant to be filled. The value is not in the size of the container, but in the richness of what it holds. A thimbleful of pure golden joy might be more precious than a river of tepid grey mediocrity. It's a thought that brings a strange comfort. The measure is absolute, but the meaning contained within it is not. You find yourself watching the plain grey thread, now with a new appreciation. This long span Lachesis is allotting, is a gift. It is the gift of time. Time to learn a skill, to love a family, to watch the seasons change dozens upon dozens of times. It's the time to become an elder, a keeper of stories, a familiar and beloved presence in a small community. Historians still argue whether the concept of a heroic, glorious death in youth the Kleos, sought by warriors like Achilles was, a widespread ideal, or an aristocratic affectation celebrated by the bards. For the average person, the anonymous farmer or artisan this thread belongs to, would the promise of glory truly outweigh the simple, profound gift of more sunrises? Looking at the peaceful, methodical work of Lachesis, you doubt it. The slow, steady rhythm of her measuring feels like a gentle reassurance. This will be a long one. A good, long life. With a beginning, a very long middle, and a distant, peaceful end. The measuring continues, a silent and rhythmic meditation. Arm length after arm length, the life of this quiet soul is being defined. Then, an anomaly occurs. As a length of thread passes through Lachesis's fingers, it suddenly snags. A knot. Not a large, dramatic tangle, but a small, tight, and frustratingly complex little bundle in the otherwise perfect strand. Clotho's spinning falters for a moment, the rhythm broken. Lachesis stops her measuring. All three sisters, for the first time since you arrived, seem to focus their collective ancient attention on this single tiny point of complication. The thread pulls taut. This is a moment of crisis. Not a dramatic, epic crisis, but a personal one. This is the knot of a difficult, life-altering choice. It's the point where the mortal, down in the world of light and noise, has exercised their sliver of free will and done something unexpected. They've made a decision that goes against the grain of their placid, pre-assigned path. Perhaps they refused a sensible, arranged marriage to run away with a penniless musician. Or they abandoned the family farm to try their luck in the big city. Maybe they simply chose to forgive someone they were destined to hate forever. It's a small act of defiance, a deviation from the script, and it has sent a snag all the way up the cosmic chain of command. You half expect a moment of divine frustration, an exasperated sigh, maybe the celestial equivalent of turning it off and on again. But the Moirai exhibit no such emotion. This is not the first knot they have encountered, nor will it be the last. Atropos, the silent sister with the shears, glances at it with an impassive eye, as if to ask, "Is this one terminal? Do I cut now?" But Lachesis simply holds the thread steady. She does not try to pull it tight and force the knot through. That would only make it worse, a lesson any human who has tried to untangle a fine necklace knows all too well. Instead, Clotho and Lachesis lean in closer, their ancient heads almost touching. Their gnarled fingers, which you've only seen perform broad repetitive tasks, now display a breathtaking microdexterity. With the patience of mountains, they begin to work on the knot. They don't speak, but they move in perfect coordination, a silent team of celestial surgeons. One sister gently loosens a loop, while the other teases out a strand from its heart. Their movements are slow, deliberate, and incredibly gentle. There's no ripping or tearing. They are not punishing the mortal for their choice. They are simply accommodating it. They are smoothing out the narrative, untangling the complication, to allow the story to continue. This scene gives a physical form to a classic historical concept: the relationship between fate and human agency. In Greek tragedies, like the story of Oedipus, any attempt to defy one's fate often became the very mechanism that brought it about. This is a well-known fact. Oedipus, fleeing the prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother, led him directly to the crossroads, where he unknowingly did just that. A quirky, lesser-known parallel exists in some Norse myths, where even the gods were bound by the threads woven by the Norns, their own version of the fates. Odin, the chief god, could see the future, but was often powerless to change it, his frantic efforts only ensuring the pre-written outcome of Ragnarok. Here, however, you're seeing a more subtle interaction. The knot is not being ignored, nor is it causing a catastrophic break. It's being patiently, skillfully resolved. The Moirai's reaction suggests that a mortal's choice isn't a true rebellion against fate, but rather a complication that must be integrated into the existing plan. The overall length and ultimate end of the thread remain the same, but the path it takes to get there has just developed an interesting, unexpected detour. The man who ran away with the musician might still die old in his bed, but his journey will now be filled with more vibrant and chaotic flecks of colour than his original, plainer path would have allowed. Historians still argue whether the average Greek person felt oppressed by the idea of fate, or comforted by it. Was it a source of fatalistic despair, or a liberating force that freed you from the crushing burden of ultimate responsibility for your life's grand outcomes? Seeing the fates work on this knot, you lean towards the latter. They don't seem angry. They seem like master craftswomen presented with a challenging, but ultimately solvable technical problem. After a few silent, focused moments, their work is done. The knot is gone. The thread is once again smooth and straight. Lachesis releases her tension, and the smooth, rhythmic measuring resumes as if nothing had ever happened, the personal crisis of a mortal soul resolved with the quiet competence of eternity. Lachesis's rhythmic measuring finally ceases. She has reached the end of her allotment. The long but finite length of the plain grey thread now lies loosely coiled on the indeterminate floor between the three sisters. It shimmers ever so faintly, a completed story waiting for its final punctuation. Now, your attention is drawn to the third and final sister, the one who has sat in profound silence this entire time, patiently waiting. This is Atropos. Her name means the inflexible or the unturnable, and her role is the most final, the most absolute. She is the cutter. Slowly, she bends forward and picks up her tool. It lies in her lap, not resting, on the stone bench beside her. It is her personal instrument, and it never leaves her. You expect to see a grand, fearsome weapon, something brutal and imposing, but the instrument she holds is surprisingly small and simple. It's a pair of shears. They are not ornate, not bejewelled with the souls of the damned or anything so dramatic. They look like a simple pair of trimming shears a gardener might use, the kind for pruning dead blossoms from a rose bush. They are crafted from the same dark, starless material as her sister's tools, and they radiate an aura of immense age. The shears are worn smooth with use. You can see how the handles have been shaped by her grip over countless eons. They look like an extension of her own hand. And yet, despite their obvious antiquity, the blades gleam with a wicked sharpness. Not the bright, vulgar glint of newly sharpened steel, but a deeper, more profound edge, as if the very concept of sharpness itself resides within the metal. This is an edge that has never needed to be honed and will never grow dull. It is an edge that doesn't cut matter, but cuts continuity. It severs the line between is and was. The shears make no sound as she opens and closes them once, a silent, preparatory gesture. Atropos is often depicted in art and literature as the most fearsome and cruel of the three sisters, the dreaded grim reaper of the Greek world. A historical fact, often emphasized, is that no one, not even Zeus, could overrule her. When the time came, the time came. Petitions for extension were not accepted. But looking at her now, you see no cruelty in her expression. Her face is a mask of solemn, dispassionate duty. There is no malice here, no grim satisfaction. She is not an executioner, relishing her work. She is a craftswoman, performing the final, necessary step in a long and meticulous process. Her stillness is not menacing, it is calming. It is the stillness of absolute certainty. You recall a quirky and perhaps telling tidbit from Roman culture which inherited these fates as the parquet. The third fate, morta, was sometimes associated with the Roman goddess of funerals, Libitina. Temples to Libitina were not just places of worship, they were also the headquarters for the city's undertakers, a place where one could hire professional mourners and purchase all the necessary funeral supplies. It was a very practical, almost bureaucratic approach to death. Looking at Atropos, you see that same pragmatic energy. She is the divine functionary in charge of life's final transaction. Her gaze is now fixed on the thread. Lachesis holds one end, and Clotho holds the other, pulling the measured length of destiny taut between them. It hangs suspended in the grey air, a perfect, straight line. Atropos takes her time. She inspects the thread, her head tilted slightly, like an artist judging their work. She's not re-evaluating the life, or its contents. She is simply lining up her cut. Precision is everything. This is not an act of violence to be rushed. It is a moment that demands reverence and exactitude. Historians still argue about the precise moment the Greeks believed the soul or psyche departed the body. Was it with the final breath? The last heartbeat? At the moment the body grew cold? These philosophical and medical debates raged for centuries. But here, in this workshop, you realize that from a cosmic perspective, the debate is irrelevant. The soul departs when Atropos decides it departs. She holds the power to make that final determination, and her instrument, those simple, terrifyingly sharp shears, waits, poised and ready. The thread hangs, still and expectant, in the eternal, silent space, awaiting the end that has been written since its very beginning. The tension is not one of fear, but of profound and quiet anticipation. The measured thread hangs perfectly still, stretched between Clotho and Lachesis. Atropos, with her shears poised, does not yet make the cut. She waits. All three sisters are now frozen in a silent tableau, a moment of profound stillness that seems to stretch into its own small eternity. The constant, low hum of the workshop is the only thing that proves time has not stopped completely. What are they waiting for? You realize they are waiting for Kairos. In the world of the ancient Greeks, there were two primary concepts of time. The first, and most familiar to us, was Chronos. This is linear, sequential time, the steady, measurable ticking of the clock, the relentless march of minutes into hours, days into years. This is the time that Lachesis just measured out with her arm lengths. But the second concept, Kairos, is more subtle and profound. Kairos is not about quantity, but about quality. It is the opportune moment, the supreme and fleeting instant when an action is most potent, most perfect. It's the perfect time to plant a seed, the perfect moment to deliver a speech, the exact instant to release an arrow from the bow. It's not a duration, it's a window. A window that opens and closes in a heartbeat. Atropos is waiting for the Kairos of this life's end. The thread must be cut not just when its measured length runs out, but at the precise, cosmically correct moment. This could mean waiting for the mortal to finish a final conversation, to take one last look at a sunset, or to simply fall into a deep, peaceful sleep from which they will not awaken. It's an act of subtle, profound grace that is completely at odds with the typical portrayal of Atropos as a grim, merciless figure. She is not just an executioner. She is a master of timing, ensuring that the final note of the symphony of a life is struck with perfect resonance. You are reminded of a historical fact from ancient Greek warfare. A successful general needed not just a strong army, Chronos, the time spent building it, but also a keen sense of Kairos, the ability to see that one fleeting moment of enemy weakness and strike decisively. The entire outcome of a battle could hang on that single inspired instant of perfect timing. Atropos is the ultimate general, and her enemy is not an army, but dissonance. She waits to ensure the end is harmonious, not a jagged, discordant tear in the fabric of existence. She's looking for the natural end of the musical phrase, not just stopping the song mid-verse. While they wait, you lean in and inspect the length of finished thread more closely. The colours you saw being spun in earlier, the crimson of passion, the gold of joy, the indigo of sorrow wear, all there, distributed along the grey strand like tiny embedded jewels. From a distance they were barely visible, but up close you see they form a pattern, a unique story. There are long stretches of placid grey, punctuated by a sudden burst of colour, followed by more grey. There's a comical modern thought. If this was a data readout of a life, you'd say it had periods of stable uptime punctuated by occasional emotional spikes. It's the EKG of a soul. A quirky related tidbit is the Greek art of divination through alluromancy, or flower reading. A person would write a question on a slip of paper, roll it in a ball of flour dough, bake it, and then a diviner would interpret the shapes and cracks on the cooked dough ball to find the answer. It's a beautifully domestic and slightly absurd way to seek guidance. The fates need no such tools. They are not reading the signs, they are writing them. They are waiting for the mortal's own actions and the subtle currents of the universe to align perfectly to create the Kairos they are watching for. Historians still argue about the extent to which the concept of Kairos was a philosophical ideal versus a genuine, deeply felt spiritual belief that influenced daily decisions. Was it an abstract concept for rhetoricians and generals, or did the average farmer feel its presence when deciding the perfect day to harvest his olives? Looking at the profound patience on the faces of the Moirai, you're convinced of its fundamental importance. They will wait for minutes, hours, perhaps even days in mortal time, holding this life in suspension until the conditions are exactly right. The thread is ready, the length is measured. But the work is not yet complete. The final act requires not just precision, but perfect, sublime timing. And so they wait, silent and still, in the infinite grey heart of everything. The moment arrives, the perfect Kairos. There is no external signal, no bell, no celestial flash of light. It's a shift in the hum of the universe, a subtle change in the tension of the thread, an alignment that only the three of them can perceive. The window is open. Atropos moves. Her motion is not sudden or violent. It is fluid, economical, and imbued with a final, serene grace. She brings the gleaming blades of her ancient shears up to the thread. The two halves of the tool open, their dark surfaces seeming to absorb the very idea of light, and they gently embrace the grey filament. You brace yourself for the sound. You expect a loud snip, a noise of finality and severance, something to startle the quiet of this immense space. But that is a human expectation, born of a world filled with noisy, jarring endings. The reality is far more peaceful, far more profound. As the shears close, there is almost no sound at all. It is less of a noise, and more of an absence of sound. A whisper of release, a soft, gentle thump, like a single speck of dust landing on velvet. It is the sound of a tension that has been held for a lifetime, finally being let go. The sound of a sigh. The cut is instantaneous and perfect. The two ends of the severed thread do not fray or unravel. They simply cease. One moment there was a continuous whole. The next there are two distinct and finished pieces. The end of the thread that Clotho is still holding, connected to the spindle, remains unchanged, ready to be wound up and put away. But the end of the long measured piece that Lachesis holds now hangs limply, its story concluded. Its faint glow, the soft luminescence of a life being lived, extinguishes in an instant, leaving behind just a plain, inert grey fibre. It's like a light bulb that hasn't shattered, but has simply had its power source disconnected. The soul has been released. The famous final words of historical figures are a well-documented obsession. "Et tu, brute?" or "I have not yet begun to fight," are legendary. These dramatic history book endings are how we frame a life's conclusion. But for this plain, grey thread, and for the countless billions like it, there were no famous last words. There was only this gentle, silent snip, an end without an audience, without fanfare, without a scribe to record it for posterity. It was an end as quiet and unremarkable as the life it concluded, and there is a profound beauty and comfort in that symmetry. You recall a quirky fringe medical theory from the 17th century where a physician proposed that life was a fermentation process within the blood, and death was simply the moment this fermentation ceased. It was a strange alchemical take on biology, but it captures something of what you've just witnessed. The gentle bubbling of life simply stopped, the process complete. The end was not a failure or a breakage, but a natural and expected conclusion to a chemical reaction. No drama necessary. As the cut end of the thread drifts silently in the void, you think of the person it represented. In that instant, down in the mortal world, an old farmer drew his last peaceful breath in his own bed, surrounded by the sleeping sounds of the home he built. A grandmother passed away in her chair by the fire, her knitting falling from her lap. A quiet librarian closed his eyes for a nap in a sunbeam in his dusty sanctuary, and simply did not reawaken. The end, orchestrated by Atropos, was not an act of aggression, but one of mercy. It was a gentle unplugging, a final, soft release from the toil of existence. The ancient Greek poet Simonides of Ceos once wrote that death comes for all, even the man who runs away. Historians still argue about the fatalistic undertones of much of Greek lyric poetry. Was it an expression of deep-seated cultural pessimism, or a form of tough-minded realism intended to make people appreciate the present moment? Watching the aftermath of this quiet, dignified severance, it feels less like pessimism and more like an acknowledgement of a fundamental truth. The snip is inevitable, but its gentleness, its peaceful finality, robs it of its terror. In the hands of Atropos, The end is not a horror to be feared, but a quiet, necessary, and ultimately calming release. The two halves of the severed thread hang in the still grey air. The moment of finality has passed, leaving behind a profound sense of peace. The cosmic tension has been resolved. But the work is not yet finished. You watch, intrigued, as Lachesis, the allotter, begins to handle the long, now inert piece of thread. The life story it represents is complete, and it must now be archived. There is a celestial filing system for finished lives, and it's just as methodical and unglamorous as the rest of this process. With practiced rhythmic motions, Lachesis begins to wind the grey thread into a neat, tight bundle. She doesn't use a spool or a card. Instead, she winds it around her own thumb and pinky finger, creating a tidy, figure-8 skein, exactly as a mortal weaver would prepare a length of yarn for storage or dyeing. Each loop is perfect, laid precisely next to the one before it. The small flecks of colour, the red, gold and indigo, disappear into the tightly wound coil, their individual stories now contained within the whole. The final object is a small, dense bundle of grey fibre, unassuming and compact. It's the entire existence of a human being, from their first breath to their last sigh, condensed into an object you could hold in the palm of your hand. It seems strangely comical, a whole lifetime reduced to something that looks like it belongs in a celestial knitting basket. Once the entire length is wound, she slides the skein from her fingers and, with a quick, deft twist, ties it off using its own end. The finished product is secure. The life is now officially closed, bundled and docketed. It's the mythical equivalent of zipping a file and moving it to an archived folder on a computer. This systematic process is a historical fact of textile work across all cultures. Proper storage of spun thread was essential to prevent tangling and decay. The Moirai, it seems, adhere to the best practices of their craft, even in the afterlife. Their workshop is tidy and organised. Atropos, her part in this specific task complete, has already set her shears back in her lap. Her posture once again one of absolute patience. It's now Clotho's turn to act again. She turns and, for the first time, you notice a feature of the workshop you had overlooked. Behind their simple stone bench, fading into the grey mist, is a structure. It is a vast, unending wall of small grey stone cubbyholes, like an infinite post office or a library of the dead. It stretches up and out of sight in every direction, a honeycomb of compartments receding into the gloom. Each cubbyhole is identical, and nearly every single one is filled with a small grey bundle, exactly like the one Lachesis now holds. Clotho takes the newly bundled life from her sister. She doesn't need to look for an empty spot. She seems to know exactly where this one belongs. She rises from the bench a rare movement that seems to stretch the fabric of the space around her and walks a few paces to the wall. She reaches up to a specific, seemingly random compartment and gently places the little grey skein inside. It fits perfectly. A quirky parallel that comes to mind is the practice of Roman burial societies, or collegia. These were social clubs that collected dues from members to ensure they would receive a proper burial, often in a large shared tomb called a columbarium literally, a dovecote which was lined with small niches for holding funerary urns. This celestial wall is the ultimate columbarium, but it holds the essence of the life itself, not just the ashes. The moment the thread is placed, its compartment is no longer distinguishable from the trillions of others. The story is filed away. The farmer, the potter, the quiet librarianther, joys, sorrows, their one brave choice that caused a note it all now rests anonymously in this silent, colossal archive. Historians still argue whether the Greeks believed in a personal, individual judgment after death, similar to Egyptian beliefs, or a more impersonal, fading into the shadow realm of Hades. This process you're witnessing suggests something in between. The life is preserved, acknowledged, and carefully stored, but its individual identity seems to be subsumed into the collective whole. It's valued enough to be kept, but not prominent enough to have its own labelled shelf. It has become a tiny, indistinguishable part of the grand, silent record of everything that has ever lived. Clotho returns to the bench, her task complete, settling back into her familiar position, ready for the next. The moment Clotho sits back down on the stone bench, the cycle begins again. There is no pause for reflection. There is no coffee break, no ceremonial cleansing of the tools, no moment of silence for the life just archived. The immense, silent machinery of destiny simply resets to its starting position. One life has ended, its file closed, and so another must begin. The efficiency is absolute, the rhythm unending and profoundly, deeply tedious. It's the ultimate cosmic assembly line, and the shift never ever ends. Your gaze returns to Clotho, the spinner. Her ancient gnarled hand lifts once more into the grey sourceless air. Just as before, a shimmering wisp of potential begins to coalesce above her palm. A new soul, a fresh possibility, is drawn from the void. The great low hum of the workshop, which had seemed to dip into an even deeper silence, returns to its steady, eternal frequency. The engine of creation is spooling up for the next unit. You are struck by the profound impersonality of it all. The Moirai exhibit no fatigue, no boredom, no sense of Sisyphean despair at the endlessness of their task. Their faces are calm, their movements practiced, their focus renewed. This unwavering rhythm is, in itself, a core philosophical concept. The cyclical nature of time was a common belief in many ancient cultures. A famous historical fact is the Greek concept of the Great Year, the idea that the planets would eventually return to their original starting positions, at which point the entire history of the universe would repeat itself exactly as it had before. Every life, every war, every choice would be relived in an infinite loop. While a mind-bending idea, it suggests a universe of perfect, if terrifying, order and repetition. The work of the fates that you're witnessing feels like a microcosm of that grand, cyclical belief. Each life is a small year, a complete cycle from potential to memory, and it repeats and repeats and repeats. You watch as the new ball of light solidifies, pulsing with its own nascent energy. Will this thread be plain and grey like the last one? Or will it be spun of royal purple? Or shimmering gold? Or the blood red of a warrior? There is no way to know. The quality of the raw material seems identical. Any special qualities are assigned in the spinning and measuring. A quirky tidbit of ancient Greek folklore claimed that some people were twice born, often heroes like Dionysus, who were reborn after a first death. You wonder if the fates ever grab a bit of used thread from the archive to recycle. Does Dionysus's bundle get pulled from its cubbyhole every few millennia for another go? Probably not. The process here seems relentlessly linear, one new soul after another. Reduce, reuse, recycle doesn't appear to be part of the cosmic charter. As Clotho prepares her distaff again, your modern mind grapples with the sheer scale of the operation. Billions lived in the ancient world. Trillions have lived and died throughout all of history. And the Moirai have sat here, on this one simple bench, and spun, measured and cut every single one. From the first single-celled organism that ever existed to the last human who will ever be born. It's a workload that makes the most complex logistical operation on Earth look like a child's lemonade stand. The fact that they do it without complaint, without error, and without pause is perhaps the most divine thing about them. They are not powerful because of their flashes of anger or miraculous interventions. They are powerful because of their unending, unwavering consistency. Historians still argue about the origins of the Moirai. Were they an invention of the poets to explain the inexplicable turns of life and death? Or were they a remnant of a much older pre-Hellenic mother-goddess cult representing the triple aspects of maiden, mother and crone? Seeing them in action, the triple goddess theory feels compelling. Clotho as the maiden, bringing forth new life. Lachesis as the mother, nurturing and defining the course of that life. And Atropos as the crone, the wise elder who brings life to its peaceful and necessary conclusion. They are not three separate entities, but a single three-part process, a seamless flow of creation, duration, and completion. And now, the flow begins anew. Clotho affixes the glowing potential to her distaff. Her fingers pinch the first filament, and she gives her spindle that familiar, deft twist. A new thread begins to spin. Another story begins to unfold, in the endless, patient, and methodical workshop at the centre of forever. As Clotho's spindle begins its gentle, hypnotic descent once more, spinning a new and unknown destiny, a subtle shift occurs in the silent workshop. For the very first time since you arrived, you feel a flicker of awareness directed towards you. It's not a hostile feeling, not even a curious one. It's more like the passive, ambient awareness of a deep-sea creature sensing a minor change in the water pressure far above. For one brief, heart-stopping moment, the three ancient figures lift their heads in unison. Their work does not pause there. Spindle still turns, the hum still vibrates through your bones, but their collective ancient gaze turns away from the thread and settles, calmly and dispassionately, upon you. In that single, fleeting instant, you are no longer an invisible observer. You are seen. Their eyes are not what you would expect. They are not pools of starlight or gateways to madness. They are simply eyes. Old eyes. The colour of faded linen, of sea-worn pebbles, of the grey void in which they sit. They hold no judgment, no malice, no wisdom that can be articulated in words. They are simply mirrors, and in their ancient, placid depths, they are not looking at you. They are looking at your thread. For a split second, you become hyper-aware of your own existence, not as a body or a mind, but as a continuity, a strand being spun out in some parallel, unseen dimension. A thread with its own length, its own texture, its own scattered flecks of colour. You feel a phantom echo of Lachesis's measuring hand, allotting your own span. You sense the looming, patient presence of Atropos's shears, waiting for the arrival of your own personal kairos. It's not a frightening sensation. In fact, it's profoundly calming. To be seen by them is to be acknowledged as part of their great cosmic tapestry. It is a confirmation that your small story, your plain or colourful or knotted thread, has a place in the grand, silent archive. Your life, with all its triumphs and absurdities, is a line in the endless poem of existence. It is worthy of being spun. It's a bit like being an extra in a massive film production, and for one brief moment the director, producer and editor all look over and give you a quiet, professional nod of acknowledgement. This feeling of being part of a larger cosmic order is a core component of Stoic philosophy, which became incredibly popular in the Hellenistic and Roman worlds. A key tenet of Stoicism, a solid historical fact, was the concept of sympathia, the belief that all things in the universe are mutually interconnected and part of a single rational whole governed by divine logos. Acknowledging your small part in this vast interdependent system was a source of great tranquility and resilience. What you're feeling now, under the gaze of the Moirai, is the pure, unfiltered essence of that Stoic ideal. You are connected. You belong to the pattern. Just as quickly as it happened, the moment is over. Their three heads turn back in unison to the task at hand. Their focus on your thread was no more than a master weaver glancing at a single warp line to ensure it hasn't snagged before returning her focus to her shuttle. It was a moment of quality control, nothing more. A strange, quirky thought flits through your mind. You wonder if your thread has any unusual colours they haven't seen in a while. A fleck of neon green for that one time you ate a strange glowing candy? A shimmering pixelated fleck for the hours spent lost in digital worlds? The thought dissolves as soon as it forms. a mortal absurdity in this place of timeless archetypes. As their attention returns completely to their work, the sense of being an individual melts away again, and you are once more just a silent, invisible presence. The brief connection served its purpose. It was a quiet reminder, a gentle touch on the shoulder from the universe itself. The new thread continues to spin, and its colour, you can now see, is the same plain, comforting grey as the last one. Another good, quiet life is being brought into being. The cycle continues, dependable and eternal. Historians still argue about the emotional impact of such a deterministic worldview on the individual's psyche. Did it lead to apathy? Or did it, by removing the anxiety of the unknown, free people to live more virtuously and fully in the moments they were given? Here, in this silent, grey eternity, watching the ceaseless, methodical work of the fates, the answer feels simple. It brings peace. It brings a profound, bone-deep sense of calm, to know that the ultimate rhythm of the universe is not chaos or fury, but the steady, gentle, and unending turning of a single, simple spindle. The light in the great, grey space seems to soften. The constant hum seems to lower in pitch, becoming a deeper, more resonant thrum. Your time as an observer is drawing to a close. The images of the three sisters on their bench begin to blur slightly at the edges, their forms becoming less distinct, their movements slowing down, as if you are watching them through a long and hazy dream. The sharp details of the thread, the shears, the spindle, all begin to merge back into the formless, restful grey that surrounds them. Your own thread, your own story, is still spinning out there somewhere, but your brief, privileged glimpse into the cosmic workshop that crafts it is now fading. The rhythm of their work has imprinted itself upon your mind, a steady, calming cadence that you can carry with you as you drift away from this place. The slow, methodical work of the fates is not a horror story of predestination, but a lullaby of cosmic order, a quiet reassurance that every story has its purpose, its place, and its peaceful, perfectly timed end. Their unending, tedious rhythm becomes your own gentle, sloping path into a deep and profound sleep, a quiet acceptance of the great, soft, and endless turning of the world.